Welcome to One on One. I'm Phil Tillman, your host, and today we're welcoming back in the studio Greg Bassett.
I told you if I hang around, you'll let me in.
Well, not only are we going to let you in, but I've actually twisted your arm and asked you to be my replacement on Pac 14's one-on-one program, and you've agreed.
I have. I'm thinking we should probably talk more about it, and I'm hoping it's just a phase you're going through. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a natural myself.
Thank you.
And I hope you agree that, and I've been doing this for a long time.
You have at least 15 years,
Yeah,
14 years?
something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. I don't even know what the number show is, but it's 500 or 600. Anyway, and it seems to be a natural because it goes right along with what you're doing with the Salisbury Independent, isn't it?
Yeah, every week we do a one-on-one interview with some newsmaker in the community, and I think it matches really well.
Yeah. Well, in the issue that we're taping this in advance of when this will be on the air, but in this week's issue, you had an interview with Mabel Long.
We did.
And I can imagine some of the stories that she would have about Hubba Hubba and the pictures and just the memorabilia that she would have from his long career in politics.
Yeah, this started from social networking, from Facebook. She posted 2 pictures of Senator John Kennedy when he was in Salisbury campaigning. And she had that on her Facebook page. So I immediately contacted her via Facebook because there's been lots of questions about the Kennedy visits to Salisbury, and I've never gotten clarity. I've heard all different kinds of stories, and I don't know that I still know all the answers. But the photos that she has show the senator arriving at the airport in Salisbury, talking to the mayor, talking to Joe Long is in the middle.
Yeah. And Jim Caldwell was in
Jim
there.
Caldwell's in there, and I forget who the other
Boyd
one was.
McClernand was the...
he was the mayor.
He was the mayor.
Yeah.
And then the fellow that from Avery Hall.
From Avery Hall, and I can't remember his name.
Well, I'll look it up in the paper.
Yeah.
But I remember him also. He was a character, a longtime member of Green Hill. I shouldn't be able to remember his name. But anyway.
And then there was a photo of Kennedy at Johnny's and Sammy's. And Long's grandson came in from Little League, and he's still in his uniform in the photo, shaking hands with John F. Kennedy. And she told the story that they all got in a car, someone's car, and they went down to Ocean City, and they went through Pittsville and Willards and toward Parsonsburg and toward those areas as well. I had never heard that. Now, the stories I've always heard, I've heard one story that Senator Kennedy came to Salisbury, and he came to speak to like a Democratic Club meeting at Johnny's and Sammy's, and he drove himself down. I've heard that story a couple times.
I never heard that.
I heard another story that he was in town and he rode through the park with Mary Knock. Mary Knock escorted him around. So I haven't verified these things, and I really want to dig into them. So the first effort here, I think, is with Mabel Long, and she was very touched. She's got a lot of memories. She's what, 90 something. I'm not sure she told us how old she was.
She said 90.
Is she 90?
Did she?
Or 90-ish, or in her 90s.
Yeah. I remember her very well from E.S. Adkins.
Right.
I mean, she was a mainstay at E.S. Adkins.
Right.
And gosh, what memories she must have.
Joe Long was the consummate politician. He was an amazing guy. I mean, you actually knew him really well.
Oh, yeah.
But to this day, when I got accepted to college, he sent me a personal letter congratulating me on getting into college. And, you know, it was just the way they did it, but it really made an impression on me at the time as a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Just a real personable guy.
Yeah. Well, even after his retirement, Mabel said that he got the newspapers and read them from front to back. And if he would pick out an item, like in today's newspapers, you're seeing a lot of local high school athletes who are signing letters of intent.
Right.
Every one of them would have gotten a letter from Joe Long.
Yeah.
You know, that's
yeah,
consummate.
It really is. Yeah.
Neat guy.
Yeah.
Neat guy. Good memories. Well, there was also an article in there about this, an anniversary of the fact that the Sheriff Graham was murdered in the jail.
Yeah, 46 years ago, 1968. It was a story I'd always heard about, and I do that This Week in History column, and I stumbled across it there. But the week wasn't matching up right because I do the actual day. So, if today is Thursday, I matched the actual date, and the date didn't match up. But Tim Robinson, who works at the sheriff's office, Deputy Robinson, he told me that he had the original clip, and I was able to find it on the internet anyway, and did some research, and it was a fascinating story. I remember as a kid hearing about it, but I didn't know the details. I never really knew what happened. But it goes back to when the county jail was in the courthouse, in the courthouse annex, upstairs, and the sheriff still lived in an apartment in the courthouse. And I remember that's how it used to be. In fact, years ago, I found some campaign memorabilia in Worcester County where a sheriff candidate touted that his wife could cook for 20 men. And that was a way to save the county money. If they elected him sheriff, his wife could cook.
Yeah.
And that would qualify him for office. I don't remember if the guy won, but that's where we're coming from. I mean, that's what it was like. And the sheriff lived right there by the inmates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ran the jail back then.
And unfortunately for Sam Graham, happened to be there when this fella got a hold of a gun.
Right.
In those days they had what they called trustees.
Right.
And they would send so and so down to get the laundry for the sheriff, and he would just walk out the door and go down to the Sunshine Laundry or whatever and pick up and do all kinds of errands and stuff like that and clean up around the courthouse. But there were people who were in and out. It was kind of like the Andy Taylor at Mayberry.
Right.
It was very relaxed for a lot of those people. But
in this, I did way too much way too much research than I was able to write in the story. I actually read the man who committed the crime, and I'm forgetting his name now. It's a weird name, but anyway, I read his appeal, some of the court records with his appeal. The reporting at the time said that he got the gun, it was smuggled in a cake, just like you hear in the movies.
Really?
Someone had put the gun in a cake that was delivered. In the appeals trial, it said that it was delivered in a box of candy. But it was a .22 caliber gun, and it was used to shoot the turnkey. And then when the sheriff heard the commotion, he came in, and then he was also shot. And then the man was able to escape, and they caught him the next morning up in Dover, in a hotel in Dover. Huge manhunt, the largest manhunt ever.
Oh yeah.
Supposedly on the shore.
Yeah. Well, we had been here about 4 years then, so I was in my mid-20s somewhere in there. But that was a huge story, and everybody knew Sheriff Graham.
Right. Because
the sheriff back then, as is the case today, is probably one of the most popular politicians that there is. It's a very public position. And people think the world of it. My grandfather used to go in and sit in the courthouse in the sheriff's office during the day, long after he was retired. He was blind.
Right.
And he would go in there and sit around and talk to the guys, and sometimes the sheriff would say, well, take Mr. Tillman home. And then they'd save my grandmother having to go in and pick him up and all that. Yeah, I mean, it's just the old days.
Just the old days. And he succeeded Jesse Pollitt, who was the sheriff, Rick Pollitt's father.
Grandfather.
Grandfather. Oh, I'd forgotten all of that. Right, his father was Judge Pollitt.
That's right, yeah.
So I'd forgotten all that. And then William Shockley came in as the sheriff, and certainly Sheriff Shockley had some issues.
Yeah.
Perhaps he wasn't as
good
professional.
Old boy.
Yeah, exactly, as some of the predecessors, and that sort of led to the big changes in the sheriff's office. But certainly it was obvious that the sheriff wasn't the guy to run the jail, that you needed professionals perhaps to run the jail.
Yeah.
And that changed the sheriff's office in dimensions that no one ever imagined.
Oh, yeah.
So that we ended up building the new facility and get them out of the courthouse. And
yeah. Well, the sheriff's office moved downstairs, and the sheriff, when Hunter Nelms was sheriff, and Baker before him, lived in their own homes.
Right.
And probably made the job a lot more attractive for somebody to run for,
Right.
and professional. And of course, then the detention center was built in the 80s, in the 1980s, and did away. And I think the county has looked at ways to utilize that top floor of the courthouse for a long time, but there's all those cells. Obviously, the cells were built in such a way that you couldn't break out of them.
Right.
And so that would be the first thing. They'd have to clean all that stuff out of there.
Right.
There was one elevator that went up there, and that was for security reasons.
Right.
But
And
anyway.
the elevator was a key in that shooting, because the sheriff arrived on the elevator, and I can't remember the man's name who shot him, but knew that he was coming. So he was anticipating someone arriving because of the sound of the elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Golly day. That courthouse, and of course the county council used to, their meeting room was in the courthouse.
Right.
And if they'd have a public hearing, they'd use the old ceremonial courtroom.
Right.
Like if they had a budget hearing, they would be in that courtroom, the old courtroom that was in there.
I need to do some reporting on that, because the courthouse is in great disrepair. It's really a problem. The clock isn't working. They've put plywood up. It's an eyesore right now. Rick Pollitt, as county executive, had advocated a $30 or $35 million renovation to the courthouse. With everything's going on, no one is talking about this renovation anymore. So I need to find out, for our readers, what's going on with this, and find a way to write this, because obviously, as downtown is improving, the courthouse is looking worse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an issue. I've never been in that part of the courthouse. I haven't been in the courthouse in probably 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, like on the main floor, but in any of the courtrooms I haven't been. And I've never been in that jail section. I don't know what it's like up there. So I would love to see it.
Yeah. Well, I remember going up there when I was a county councilman, the first term, and that we were sued by a class action suit by the ACLU.
You're building a new facility to address concerns by the ACLU. The facility is this close to getting done, and then they sue you anyway.
Yeah. That it was inhumane that the cells weren't painted. They were peeling paint on the cells, and there was no exercise room. And admittedly, it was a jail that was probably built for 50 people, and we had a little over 100 inmates up there. But I went up there with the then warden, Welch was the warden, and they had a big tub, and Messick Ice Company had delivered a 100-pound block of ice, and had a big chicken house type fan.
Oh my
behind
goodness!
Blowing it in there, trying to keep the temperature 100 degrees or lower. I mean, it was awful.
I can see why the ACLU was concerned.
It was terrible. And then, of course, some people would say, "Well, it's not supposed to be great."
Right.
But anyway, we built it's a neat story. We built on the day that, and it didn't announce to anybody when the inmates were going to be moved for security reasons.
Right.
So 2 o'clock in the morning, they woke them up, all the inmates, and they had buses downstairs. The sheriff's department was there, state police were there, everybody was there. And they marched these guys down, put them in the buses, and took them out to the new detention center, Wicomico County Detention Center, brand new building. The next day, Warden Welch was walking through, and he hadn't slept in like 3 days. He was worried about this and everybody. One of the old guys that was perennial inmates at the detention center said, Warden. He said, what is it, Jesse? He said, could you get me a blanket? It's cold in here.
Golly.
It was air conditioned,
Right.
Oh, boy. Anyway, that's a long story. But jails, I mean, look at jails today. What is like 60 or 70% of the people in jail are there because of drugs.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer to that is.
For me, that enduring memory of the downtown jail on the roof of the courthouse in the annex was, I remember walking on the street with my mother one time, and I think we were going from like the Boulevard Theater to downtown for shopping, to S Apparel. There was no plaza then. And we were on the south side of the street, and she made this big deal of stopping and crossing the street so that we were on the north side of the street closer to the courthouse. And I didn't realize what we were doing. So we get up there where the inmates could see through the levers, and they couldn't see straight down, but they could see across the street. And if a woman walked down the street, they would catcall. out the window, and they would holler stuff at
Oh, yeah.
people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she didn't want the inmates to see her and say something and embarrass me and all that, embarrass herself.
Right.
But how bizarre is that inmates could be yelling at the public?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me out of here. I also we're spending a lot of time on the jail, but
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
a lot of memories, and I remember that the county had a huge, what we thought was a huge bill from Scrapple, Ralph and Paul Adams
Right.
Scrapple from Bridgeville, and going back to the days of Sam Graham and all of those guys, Scrapple was almost the staple of meals for the inmates. They'd have Scrapple for breakfast. They'd have Scrapple sandwiches for lunch, and they'd have Scrapple for dinner because it was an inexpensive way to feed them.
Yeah.
And we thought, my gosh, what's all this? How come the county's buying all this Scrapple? Well, it was for the jail.
It's a shame, but I think I could eat Scrapple every meal for the rest of my life.
It wouldn't be too hard. Yeah.
I couldn't weigh much more than I do now. could I?
Well, some of the other things that are in the paper, in your paper, issues, funding of schools. New county executive is obviously taking charge,
Yes.
which is, I think, what people wanted him to do.
Yeah.
yeah.
Based on a meeting I was at today at the chamber, there's definitely a perception of a mandate. The county council really feels like that there's a mandate.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been somewhat critical of some of his early
Have you?
decisions, but I used to behind the scenes be critical of Rick Pollitt for not being aggressive enough.
Yes.
And not exercising the power that he had in the county executive's offices, and I thought in the first 8 years of the county executive form of government, that the county council was exerting more influence than they really had the right to do.
Right.
Partly because of the personalities, partly because they had Matt Kramer
Right.
there, saying, "Hey,
man behind the curtain.
you can do this,"
Right.
and because we had a county executive who's just a nice guy.
Yeah.
Rick Pollitt is a wonderful individual. Nobody would say anything against him, except that maybe in that position he wasn't aggressive enough. And
Yeah, he certainly had his convictions, and he believed in stuff. He didn't back off on that, but
No.
he didn't want to make anyone upset.
no,
He wanted to try to appease everyone.
Now, on the other hand, our newly elected county executive has a mandate, and that mandate calls for him to take action. And hopefully, we'll find a time when all of the actions he takes are not negative actions, and somebody might look at it as a positive thing. But cutting this, cutting that, cutting so and so is probably a good first step for a conservative, and who's backed up by a very conservative county council, by
Right.
the way. But sooner or later, there's going to have to be a time when there's some initiatives, some positive initiatives that take place to say, well, here's where we want to take the county. We don't want to go. We want to do something other than just reduce expenses. We want to make a statement for what we're going to do.
Well,
We'll have to wait and see.
Right.
And maybe we should exercise, all of us, some patience for that.
And there was
the guy just did take office.
Right. Today at the chamber, at the legislative meeting at the chamber, coincidentally, there was a sort of a sense of how things might develop, and I was kind of surprised on some things. One was that Bob Culver said he wants the county council to serve as his cabinet, that he doesn't feel like he's any more important than them or any less important than them. Now, I don't know if this comes from him being on the council and trying to show respect for the council, or him not having the ego that I might have thought that he would have, in this job. So as an example, Matt Holloway on the council is a great liaison with farmers. He's from a farming family. So what Bob Culver said was, Matt is my go-to guy on agriculture issues. He said, everybody on this council has some strength that I can go to them and they can advise me on what to do on certain issues. And that stunned me. I was not ready for that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not ready for that at all, because I thought he was going to have all the answers. But he didn't have that demeanor at all.
Good.
Wayne Strasburg, who is the county administrator, who is like the the official guy who is liaison with the employees, he was in the audience, and I saw Bob call on Wayne several times with questions, and there was no accusatory type tone. It sounded like they're going to work together. So I don't know. He has 6 months to make changes in the department heads. Whether Wayne survives or not, I don't know. But I felt like there was some rapport there.
Yeah.
I got the sense of that.
And that was a concern. That
there'd be bodies flying out the windows.
Many of us felt that probably the best thing Rick Pollitt ever did was hire Wayne Strasburg.
Yeah, he certainly was an asset.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. He has did some symbolic things. The county employees have always gotten their birthdays off as a paid day. Most of us in the community are like, well, we don't have that. Why do they have that? I have to admit, it's something I've never really understood. It's a nice thing.
Yeah.
I would like to have it at my work, but really, is that appropriate? Bob took that away right away. Whether he has the power to do that, or it's just a change in the employee manual, or how that works, I'm not sure. Take-home cars. As a county council member for a long time, how much time of your life has been spent listening to people complain about take-home cars? Car in an inappropriate place, what's going on with this?
Yeah.
He abolished take-home cars for most people. How this will be implemented, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it sounds good.
And who's affected?
Right. And who's affected? Certainly the sheriff gets to keep his.
Yeah.
I guess Rick had one, so I'm sure Mr. Culver will have a take-home. I have no idea what's going to happen with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the big thing was pulling the bond bill for West Salisbury Elementary for the reconstruction of that. And that's what certainly you had some issue with. People in the school board felt blindsided. The Board of Education's had a plan for replacing schools. It's whatever it is, it's basically a 50-year plan, because they have to build, basically these buildings last 50 years in their mind. This building is 50 years, it's on the list. And Mr. Culver decided that we're not going to borrow the money for that yet. We're going to wait. Lots of debate about whether that's a good idea or not. What he said today was he's sending people in to do an evaluation so he can find out on his own what's needed, whether a new building is needed or repairs can be implemented. And it's quite the hot issue. The school board was caught off guard by this. They didn't anticipate it. Whether someone on the board, whether in the administration of the schools knew or not, who knows? But that wasn't communicated real well. And a lot of people were surprised by it. And I see that too with Mr. Culver in terms of communication. There's a lot going on, and he did get rid of his public relations person, the press person. That position was abolished on the first day. Some controversy about that as well. But for me to find out what's going on in the county government, I have to pick up the phone and call him. And he's got a lot of people in his ear right now, and taking a call from me to find out, so what did you do today?
Yeah.
Or from any reporter is a little bit awkward. So he needs to fix his operation a little bit with that. And I'm sure he'll get it together here.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, again, the Salisbury Independent looks into all of that kind of thing.
Try to, yeah.
And some of the same people that you talk to create an article or to write an article, or Susan Canfora writes an article for the paper, are the same type of people that you want to ask to come in here, and folks can, instead of reading about it,
right,
they can see and hear.
Right.
So that'll be a great opportunity, and everybody, and everybody knows you, and most people take your phone calls.
And that's either good or bad, but yeah.
Well, yeah. It's good for this particular. Now, I will tell you that about, 25% maybe of the shows that I've had on this program are people who call in
right,
and suggest, what would really be a good program is so-and-so, so-and-so. And we just had Mr. Smith, Richard Smith,
yeah,
on here. Neat guy.
Yeah.
Interesting guy. And you know what? The thing of it is, and you know this, everybody in this county has a story.
Everyone has a story.
And a lot of them are great stories. It helps if there's a visual. I think one of the first stories you're going to do is the rock and roll
Rock and Roll
revival.
Revival.
Your son was in it.
He was in the background, and my daughter, I think, cried for 2 nights just recently when she found out that she has to be in a wedding in Arizona during the same week as Rock and Roll Revival, so she can't be in it this year.
Oh my! Oh yeah. Well, I mean that what a great story that is.
Yeah.
A success story.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
It's these kids and certainly the people who organize them, and I don't know all who they are, but I'm going to learn that through the interview process, I
Right.
hope.
Yeah.
But I think I've been 4 years in a row and blown away by it.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah. The talent
Yeah.
that is here. It's nice to see and hear stories about young people that are positive.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we see in the Salisbury Independent, thank goodness.
That happened recently. We had it was I think in the election paper, and I was reading all these election stories, and there's all this conflict type coverage, and a little story that I had assigned. Some kids were putting on a concert to raise money, and I should know what it was for. I don't remember now. Oh, it was for the Salisbury Comic Arts Council to buy instruments for kids who can't afford to buy instruments, so they can borrow the instruments. It was that program. These kids did it all themselves. One kid was like the big organizer. Some kids who had done it last year had graduated and moved on, so he was taking it over, and we just profiled him. And I read that story, and I was blown away by it. I was like, if this wasn't election week, I'd put this on the cover. It's that good. And it's like a soupy story, people trying to help other people, but very impressed by the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Just that they identified this, and they took action, put a concert on, like Andy Hardy almost. Let's put on a show in the barn,
Yeah, yeah.
and we'll raise money. But it's just all these great stories that are out there with kids that are doing the right thing.
Your first show will be
He's already
on
dictating.
January the 1st, Thursday, January the 1st, 2015.
Okay.
And so that'll set the stage for things to come.
Wait, that's the day after New Year's Eve.
Yes, it is.
I usually have trouble getting out of bed that day.
Well, that's why you tape these in
Oh,
advance.
okay.
Do I have to tell you everything?
I'm sorry. I thought we were live.
All right, let's talk about New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Any New Year's resolutions for Greg Bassett or for the Salisbury Independent?
No, I just want to keep serving the readers. We seem to have a popular product and people like it, and I want to keep that luster on it, certainly. I want to keep people wanting to read it every week. But to make that work, I need lots of feedback, and I need to know what people like and what they don't like. But no, I've never been good at resolutions. I have trouble keeping them.
Oh, yeah. So you just don't make them.
No. On the side of the state's attorney's office, they put a huge billboard up today. I don't know, or maybe it's yesterday. Huge vinyl thing that promotes the downtown event for New Year's, the ball dropping that they do. Got thousands of people last year, and it looks like it's headed that way again this year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot happening. So I think New Year's this year is going to be an exciting time.
A lot of it has to do with the personalities, I think, of people, the Jake Days of the world.
Right.
The Chamber of Commerce is the young part, the facet of the Chamber of Commerce is involved in this, and it's a great thing.
Yeah, being a cynical newspaper person by trade, the JCs, I used to sort of make fun of them, like, who wants to be in the JCs? How establishment's that? What do they do at the JCs meetings? Well, just last Sunday, I went to the Salisbury Christmas Parade. It was an amazing event put on by the JCs. You see how hard these people work to making a parade is hard, especially a parade that people are cynical about, and parades are not exactly the most popular thing to do right now. But a lot of people showing up, a lot of kids really excited to see Santa Claus and see this parade. Same thing, the day before the JCs had this gift giving thing at the Walmart where poor kids were able to go pick out Christmas presents for themselves, and they have chaperones who would go with them through the Walmart and pick out the gifts. And we had a photo page in this week's paper. The look in those kids' eyes, I mean, it's just amazing. This is the JCs doing this,
Yeah.
So these groups that I'm cynical about are really doing things that really make a difference in the community. And it's that kind of thing that makes people want to be in the community and participate in the community and grow the community, that whole sense of place. I grew up in Worcester County, down near Ironshire, just south of Berlin. Berlin was not the Mecca. I mean, Berlin was what we all made fun of as a one-horse town, and now suddenly it's the coolest small town in America, whatever that marketing campaign is. And people go there to eat. I remember the first time eating dinner at the Atlantic Hotel, and it was the first date I had with my wife, which I'll start to cry thinking about that. But the bill that night was $160, and I remember thinking, what would my grandfather think that I spent $160 for dinner in downtown Berlin?
Yeah.
How dumb could you possibly be to do that? And now it's routine.
Yeah.
And the same sort of thing is happening with Salisbury. There's some restaurants coming downtown. There's some activity. My office is downtown, so when I work there late and I'm leaving town, there's cars around. There's people. There's movement. There's people who are living down there. It's a whole different vibe than it ever was. But these people, like Jake Day, they're either brilliant or they're dumb, because you and I would go, no one's going to go down there. That's a lost cause. Everyone's going to go up to the mall. Let's go to Buffalo Wild Wings. But these guys see it differently, and they're able to advocate for that and to have some success.
Yeah.
And when you talk to a Jake Day, he knows every building that's going to be renovated next and what purpose that building is going to serve for downtown. My office is in the old Kelly's Barbershop, so I basically sit where I used to get my hair cut. Never imagined that I'd be sitting here professionally, but it's I have a big window, and people ride by and they wave, and I feel really connected to what's going on, and it's fun. It's just really a lot of fun.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you,
And
Phil.
thank you for your willingness to do it. I think it's a great mix. It's just a natural, I think. So good luck with it.
And whenever you want it back, you just come back.
I'll let you know. Yeah. Well, thank you for being with us on this segment of One on One right here on Pack 14.